Welcome back to Los Comex TV. I'm your host, Javier Hernandez, and we're entering our third week of the show here. So thanks for sticking around if you've been here for the previous episodes, and welcome. If this is your first time checking out our channel, it's Sunday, April 5th, so let's get to it. Today, so I think I've mentioned on my social networks, I did actually today, been doing a lot of people, I think. I always read people doing this. Taking time to clean up, especially if you're an artist, a creative person, cleaning up your studio area, your work area, going through piles and throwing stuff out and finding stuff and rearranging things. And sometimes you pull out an old comic and then you sit down and you start reading it instead of continuing the job. But hey, that's why we buy this stuff anyway in the first place, to enjoy it. So I'm going to talk about. So I guess this is going to be the first part of a series I'll be doing on the channel over the life of the channel. We'll call this the Muerto archives. So this is part one, because when I dig through all my stuff, I've been doing comics for 22 years. I got a lot of material, not just the actual comics, but promotional items and all kinds of interesting things. So I think a majority of it might be around the El Muerto character, since that's the main thing I've been doing since '98. But I have a lot of other comics I've done, so maybe we'll have a separate series called the Los Comex archives. But today, so let's go with the first part of, I don't know how many parts we'll end up doing for the Muerto archives, but could be a good number of them. I'm going to talk about, well, let me just show this again really quick. I'm going to talk about mainly newsletters, not the ones you get through email, because those have been very popular for some time now. Old-fashioned printed newsletters, like you'd get for the PTA, right? Or, the local Rotary Club. I don't know. Wherever people would get newsletters. So let me start with this. So before my comic was out, I was working on it for some years, probably mid-90s. The first issue was published in '98, and I believe I showed the actual first comic in a previous episode. This is just a printout. This is the cover. This is the very first El Muerto comic. El Muerto, Days of the Dead, the numero uno edition. One of the longest titles ever. Number 1, 300 cents, 1998. February 98 was when it was published. But leading up to that, I was always aware, as a self-publisher, as an artist, need to promote. So I think this particular episode will probably, hopefully, come in handy to any potential or beginning comic creators who are self-publishing, who are in charge of their own publicity, their own marketing. I mean, nowadays you got to even do it in tandem with your publisher, which is smart. But I'm just saying, when we self-publish, we're on our own, so it's up to us to do all the comic work, of course. But promotion, which I know for a lot of artists sometimes it turns them off, believe it or not. Like, oh, I don't want to talk about myself. And, okay, whatever. Well, good luck. And then I just walk away and I wish them well. But so what I did in the beginning, as I was working on the comic, I did this flyer. I'm not sure where I handed it out, because I wasn't tabling right before I did the comic, but I'd probably drop it off at like festivals and events and such that I would just go to normally as someone interested in art and comics, and I'd probably leave it in bookstores at the time. So this is a flyer I did. I did it in 4 colors, kind of keeping with that tradition of the Day of the Dead. If you're ever aware of the Day of the Dead festivals and such, you see a lot of multicolored things. So I did these 4 colors, but basically it's a flyer. Rising from the Grave, fall of '97. So that's my first. There's my first error, because the book didn't come out till February of '98. But I was aiming, I had to put some date on there. El Muerto, Days of the Dead, and then here's a quick synopsis: a story about one guy's round trip to the other side, featuring Aztec gods, lost love, and a serious case of bad luck. Story and art by Javier Hernandez, 32 pages, black and white. So from the beginning, I wanted to keep the idea of El Muerto, at least in the public's mind before they met him, that it's not meant to be like this really dark, like this heavy dark story, although it does have those dark gothic elements. But with some of the wording here, some of that's kind of based on, you know, kind of the old Marvel comics, the way they'd kind of have a, sometimes like I guess a tongue-in-cheek. And also at the time I discovered the Madman comic from Mike Allred. The first graphic novel of his, I think, came out probably the early 90s. So when I got the graphic novel, the first Madman story, yeah, that made a big impression on me. Like, okay, you know what? At the time, that was one of the first what you'd call like alternative comic book superheroes, where it was someone who had sensibilities very different from just like the mainstream comic book stuff that you'd see in the market at the time. So, you know, it's overused a lot as a word, but something kind of quirky, offbeat, little humorous, little tongue-in-cheek, a little bit of heart, but also you could also swerve into, you know, horror, you know, some dark matter and such like things like that. So, like I said, these were flyers I gave out, and I actually have a stack of these still. I mean, this is old. This is what, 97? That is what, 23 years? Yikes. So let me get to the newsletters. So when February '98 did come around. Let me just take the first two. So I ended up doing, I think, about 7 or 8 over the years. I'm going to go through them all briefly. So let's see. Check it out. Here's the first two. So what these are basically, I kept it simple for myself. It's an 11 by 17 sheet of paper. I just take it to the local copy shop, which at the time, back in '98, I was probably going a lot to Kinko's. They were like the master of, actually they were 24-hour printing, believe it or not. I don't think they still do that. Now they're partnered up right as a shipping company, which makes sense, print it and ship it from there. But back in the day, I used to go to the one in La Habra. I live in Whittier. There was one in La Habra, Kinko's. In those early days, I remember going in there late at night because it'd be convenient. Okay, if I have my file ready at 9 or 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight, whatever, I could just drive over there and walk in and, you know, use one of the machines and make copies and such. I'd often run into my friend Rafael Navarro, who was working on his Sonambulo comics at the time, his early years. So I don't know, those were fun times running into like another comic creator in Kinko's. But so what I did, I printed up, I don't know, 100 or 200 of these initially, and then I just take him to my first show. So my first show where I debuted on Muerto was in San Jose at the Alternative Press Expo, the Ape, February '98. So the newsletter, I kind of based it on a little bit on, you remember that Weekly World News, that tabloid, the black and white, like this, and they were even worse than the National Enquirer, if you could believe that. But they would just make up every story, right? I think Bat Boy's the most famous character, and yes, it was a character. The way they ran their paper, so I wanted to form it like that, with kind of like screaming headlines and kind of exploitative type of copy and type, but it was all to promote my comics. So the first issue, zombie scene in San Jose, and then crowd goes bananas. Everybody went ape, yells witness. So, you know, trying to be clever and tie it into the whole ape con motif. And of course, it's up in San Jose. Tomorrow's news right now, the official Los Comex newsletter. So open it up, and you know, it's got articles in there. They were all real articles, right? But they're just kind of formatted in a hyped up type of sensationalistic headline. Publisher debuts new comic. You know, what else would you expect at a comic book convention? And just talk about the El Muerto story, the comic. Asked me at the border, you know, a little segment I did. This is questions frequently asked by people. We decided to publish our own comics. So I don't think nobody asked these actual questions, but I assumed if they had the chance to ask me what they would ask. So that's not totally false. Muerto Palooza is what I called I guess the debut run of the publicity tour. Rolls out in San Jose, and you know, exclusive scenes from Days of the Dead. So my special arrangement with the publisher, I was able to show a couple of images from the comic, and then on the back of it, you know, an ad for the one comic we had at the time. Look up, look out, look alive. A lot of my ad hype definitely taken from like that Stan Lee school of, you know, carnival, what do you call it? Carnival salesman type of hype. But this is actually a line based on one from a James Bond film, Thunderball. Look up, what is it? Look up, look out, look up, look down, look out. Here comes the biggest Bond of all, whatever. So I thought this worked for a guy coming back from the dead, and then just some more hype. And so these I would give out at my table at the convention with the hopefully a purchase of a comic, or I used to add stickers too, or I would just hand it out to someone because I figured they'll get it. They're going to be at that convention. I think it was a 2-day show probably. They're going to be walking around with this. Hopefully they'll sit down, maybe look through it, and they go, hey, let me go back and get that comic. So you do 100 or 200 of these. It's relatively inexpensive as far as like per cost. It's probably a couple of pennies each copy. So they're definitely worth doing. So February was my first show. My second show was 2 months later, and this was up in San Jose. This was in Oakland, so I had to go back up to the Bay Area at WonderCon, when WonderCon used to be held there. So the dead one hits Oakland. It's like the big one hits Oakland, or a terrible allusion to earthquakes. El Muerto latest wonder in the Bay Area. So playing with puns and such, good or bad. And more questions. My friend Rodi Montijo, a fantastic artist in his own right, he sent me this in the mail one time. Yeah, mail. Fancy that. Back in the day. He did El Muerto drawing, which was like amazing to get, right? I love the guy's art from the day I met him, and it was great to see another artist interpretation. And I saw, I did a little plug here, a look at the fantastic world of Pablo's Inferno. That's his comic. Pablo's Inferno. It ended up being a 5-part series. This little boy that goes to hell. That's the premise. Boy dies and goes to hell. There's another one of those weekly world news headlines. Join the Resurrection Revolution. I used to use that as a tagline a lot. The Resurrection Revolution. Viva el Muerto. Still available. You can still get the first issue, or only issue at the time. And I actually had now this is an actual letter. This young woman here, Denise Birdsong, she walked up to my table at the first show, and she was interested. Hey, what's El Muerto about? And she picked it up. I think she got some stickers. So then, like a few weeks later, a month later, I got a letter in my PO box from her, and she's talking about picking up the comic at San Jose Ape Show, and how much she liked it, and how excited she got to find out about Day of the Dead. Again, remember, this is back in '98. So while the Dia de los Muertos festivals were definitely, pretty much well established in like the Mexican American communities throughout the United States, especially Southwest, West Coast, you can't say it was saturated in the public consciousness the way it is now. So she was really excited to find out about the Day of the Dead through my comic. And that letter made me feel so great, because it's like, okay, someone got my comic, which is that's what you wanted as a creator. But as far as the cultural side, it was great to that was one of the things I was hoping to do, get people interested or at least discover this very interesting cultural festival from Mexico, the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. So that was that's still like my gold-plated letter to this day. So like I said, the first 2 shows, and then, my first year was the big year. So I actually made it to San Diego. Was it February, April, and then August? San Diego Comic-Con. Where in the world is Diego de la Muerte? San Diego's Comic-Con International. Sometimes you can tell by the headlines or the hype type I used, like when this was printed, right? Was it the Carmen San Diego? The Carmen San Diego show was definitely on at the time. So, double-sized issue, because I knew it was like the world's biggest comic convention. Actually, there's one bigger one in Japan, right? But other than Japan, the world's biggest comic convention, certainly in the United States. So, another pinup here, Galeria del Muerto, my friend Michael Loschenker, to this. His comics are all, comedy, humor, absurdist humor. Done these kind of rubber hose type spaghetti line drawings. I love this pinup as well. And yeah, a two-page spread, right? Really just hyping up the comic, you know, letting people know. Like, again, I was very aware I was going to be in San Diego, so definitely want to scream at the top of my lungs, this is what I got. I made a little, you know, different poster art for the comic. Stole this line here from, was it Plan 9, I think, from Outer Space, Ed Wood. Can your mind stand the shocking truth? Little Ed Wood's not bad, right? To learn from. So, yeah, look at that. Double size newsletter, you know. So I did an article, a little preview on Michael's comic, El Gato Crime Angler, since he was nice enough to do the pinup for me here. Yeah, hyping up my store, which is not a web store at the time. You mail order, right? So P.O. Box is right here, which I still have. P.O. Box 718, Whittier, California, 90608, 0718. If you want to send me something. I had 2 bumper stickers, which I had printed I was working at a screen print shop at the time. And, of course, the comic. A small little humble store, but, again, always pushing the product. That's what that's what I'm here for. I self-publish because I want to make my work and sell it. What's going on here? Yeah. Wow, I'm still talking about Days of the Dead. Pushing it here. So that was the first year. And then 98, 99, the year after, what was the song? Pretty Fly for a White Guy, right? I forgot the name of the band, but Pretty Fly for a Dead Guy. Staying with the times, you know? And let's see what this is about. I don't know if this was for a particular show. I think I just wanted to have it for whatever shows I went to during that time. I got 2 pinups, 2 guest artworks by Richard Dominguez. I'll have to talk about him later. He's a early self-publisher of Mexican-American background. He's one of the guys I looked at that just really influenced me to do my own comic book storyline. And this guy was Ramon Torres. Yeah, I met him at Comic-Con. In fact, I was rereading this. I guess I met him at Comic-Con, and I asked him if he'd ever do a pinup for me, thinking he'd mail it to me. And then he comes back to my table, like, 37 minutes later. That's pretty amazing. This is also a double-size issue. So I did a short story, El Muerto and Mad Martian Party, or Better Off Dead. So it's it's more like a fun, humorous story where basically El Muerto gets abducted by aliens, Martians, and he gets examined, right, with all their equipment, whatever, and they realize he's, blah, 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 it's Martian for he's dead. So they zap him back to the graveyard and leave him in his trademark El Muerto boxers. So thought it'd be fun to do a little short story for the newsletter. Again, more hype and talking about the background of the character. There's a little action figure. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's a little action figure that's made by Ms. Melissa Daniels at the time. So that was a great thing she did. It's based on a Fox Mulder figure from X-Files. I think it was McFarlane toy line. So that's Fox Mulder because he had the hair part in the middle, so she was able to just customize the suit and such. Little plug from my friend John Franco's comic shop at the time, where he worked at in Uptown Whittier, Pegasus Hobbies. And remember the Got Milk ad? That was a big thing back in '99. So we did a Got Life ad. So it's 99 to 2000. I did another one, another double-sized one. I had created this new offshoot of El Muerto called Manga Muerto, which I'll do a whole episode on Manga Muerto because there's like a whole thing behind it, and I got, I did several stories with him. I got a couple of versions of the collection I made. So yeah, it definitely deserves its own episode. But so I was promoting that Aztec Zombie Rises in the East and macabre Mexican manga. Here's the problem when I found this in my stack. So there was supposed to be another insert in here, right? Another double folded page, 4-page manga Muerto story. It wasn't in this one I found. It's funny because I find these all the time here around the house, and they always have it in it. But when I found this group of newsletters, it wasn't in here. So let's not worry about that right now. You'll see manga Muerto eventually if you haven't seen it by now. And you know, I got another pinup here. This is from Dan Chapman from the Bay Area. I don't know if he still does comics, but in the early days when I was starting out, he was doing his comics, and there's his take on El Muerto. And my friend Ted Secco did a back cover pinup. Very nice. So again, these things were meant to be given out at conventions and bookstores, and I'd probably put them in the mail every time someone ordered something. So this is a couple of years gap now, because last one was 2000, so 2002. This is okay. Make sure it's there. So this one also has a El Muerto story inside. Again, this was exclusive. This one was exclusive to this newsletter. It's never been reprinted as of yet. At the time, so there's other characters here, right? They're not mine. There's my character. There's a Sonambulo by Rafael Navarro, El Gato Crime Angler by Michael Oschenker, and Pablo's Inferno, or Pablo from the Pablo's Inferno comic by Rody Montijo. At the time, we had kind of decided, we were all self-publishing our own work. We had decided at the time to have No Fear, Big Umbrellas here, to form like it wasn't really an imprint, like it wasn't a company with, where we all published under the same banner. And this, and we wanted to keep the finances separate. We wanted to keep our independence. So our idea was to kind of I would keep the Los Comex brand, but also kind of, co-brand it with this thing called Big Umbrella. One day maybe we'll talk about the whole story about Big Umbrella, because we were all friends at this point, and a lot of times we do shows together. We'd actually get our tables side by side, whatever. So people will start associating the four of us as a group. So we came up with the name Big Umbrella, and we did more shows. When we did shows at that point, we would say, "Okay, we want to get 4 big umbrella tables or whatever, or 2, whatever," and it worked for a while. It wasn't anything ever that was meant to be a solid, definite thing. So I don't want to say it fell apart. It was always just a loose thing, but eventually we kind of went our own way. As far as branding, right? We were still friends and everything, but that was a fun little experiment. Why not, right? Here's a El Muerto drawing I got from a friend of mine, Yvonne Duran. That was fun, because she didn't do comics. She was an artist, so it was great to see someone who's not from the comic world take a crack at the character. So here's a story: Titanic team up featuring El Muerto and Javier Hernandez, the most outrageous team up of all time. Here's this guy, Javier. Muerto, help! If this thing gets me, I'm finished. And Muerto, Jav, if that thing gets you, we're both finished. And it's basically, this is kind of funny, poking fun at myself for, working on that second issue after all these years. And I'm talking to you about my newsletters, and I'm talking about a newsletter where I talk about the newsletters, right? How weird is that? Meta Muerto. And just rambling, and just talking about manga Muerto, and I'll talk about this one day. This CD single, my friend John Franco from the comic shop, he did El Muerto's song, so we actually printed some of those up, and then working on the next book, and basically just delaying and talking about Big Umbrella. They're the guys, and talking about that nasty procrastinator Slothrax. So basically being told by El Muerto, finish the book, man. And here's me at the table. Isn't Thunderball on TV tonight? So this was the long delayed second issue, which was not ended up not being called. I'm losing track of where I'm at here in my own history. Giant size El Muerto, yes. So what this ended up being though was a reprint of the first issue, but with a different cover in color, and a larger print run, and different things in the book, some extra features. So kind of stalling and buying myself more time for that second book, believe it or not. But anyway, that's a lesson to learn for upcoming new, younger creators. Get that second book done. So a year later, did another newsletter. I had this El Muerto costume made up maybe about a year or two before, and I, I'd ask a friend to wear it, and this friend Jared, he used to hang out at the comic shop, the Pegasus Hobbies, that my friend John worked at, and eventually John had his own shop, Franco's Comics. But yeah, Jared used to hang out there, so it's like, hey, you're about the right size. You want to wear the suit and come down to San Diego Comic Con and promote? So catching people up on what's been going on, and then two more pinups, Rogelio Ramirez Jr. and David Olivares, who is still around on Facebook. But actually, now that I think about it, I don't know what happened to Rogelio Ramirez. I have to look him up. But like I said, it's always great getting pinups from other people, whether when I ask for them or especially when they come unannounced in the mail or nowadays the email or I see it online. So here's that giant size El Muerto comic. It's not in color here, but this is the book, and with the big umbrella, remember the branded logo. And yeah, again, this is basically advertisement, so gotta push the product. So check this out. This is the last one I did, 2003. So it wasn't until 2008 that I did a new newsletter. 10th anniversary edition, right? 1998 to 2008. The border returns back from the grave. So there was a lot of news to catch people on up in the 5 years. Least of which was the El Muerto film came out at that point in 2007. Then it was on DVD at the time. So I'll mention that. A new El Muerto comic. Javier Hernandez. Yeah, I started hosting a podcast called Planet Comic Book Radio. We'll probably talk about that in the future. El Muerto appeared in the Baldo newspaper strip for like a 5 or 6 part storyline, culminating in the Sunday, November 2nd, Day of the Dead entry. And so yeah, again, a new newsletter, 10 years later, same old thing, talking about the history of the newsletters. So it was really cool to be able to be talking about the El Muerto movie, in my newsletter. There's the DVD. Here's a little scene of El Muerto in the Baldo comic strip. Definitely we'll talk about that in its own episode, I think. But my friends Hector Cantu, Carlos Castellanos, the creators of the strip, they basically they try to have like a guest star once a year. And one year they asked me to do it. So yeah, my character literally appeared in the newspaper strip. And in fact, we came up with a storyline, and Carlos would draw the story, and then he would leave a blank spot wherever El Muerto had to appear. So literally, that's my art appearing in the newspaper strip, which is pretty cool. It's like 200 papers nationwide. That was like that was like a dream come true. I never thought I had, it was awesome. And this was the new El Muerto comic at the time. Dead and Confused, part 1, and a little promo for my podcast. So that was my first foray into doing any type of podcasting. Talking about Demolition Dove, which I mentioned Demolition Dove in an earlier episode in the Man Swamp comic. And then I had another podcast, actually, think about it, called Javiland. So Planet Comic Book Radio, this was more like a one-on-one interview show. Some of them would be in the studio. Otherwise, it'd be over the phone. It would be like an hour-long talk with a different creator, usually comic book creators. But at one time, I actually interviewed Peter Fernandez, the creator of, not the creator of Speed Racer, but the voice actor and the director of the cartoon series, right? Because it came over from Japan, and his job was to translate the episodes. And he didn't speak Japanese. He would just, by looking at the episode, he would just figure out the dialogue he'd want to use to make it a story. And he voiced Speed Racer and a couple other characters. And he had only like 2 or 3 other actors to do all the rest of the voices. Anyway, that was an amazing experience to interview him. I'm sure I'll probably talk about Speed Racer in its own episode in the future, because that's a hugely influential show and a favorite show of mine. And oh wow, so cartoonistas of the so my friend Jim Lujan and I, Jim Lujan's an animator, he does animated films. We came up with this group called the Cartoonistas here in where I live, in our area called El Monte. The city of El Monte is kind of based from there, but it was just a group of a bunch of artists, cartoonists, but also different type of artists that would get together for events in the area, like live art shows and signings and such. So that went on, I think, I'm not sure, a year or two. So that was something fun to be involved with. Hanging out with a group of artists is always fun and exciting. So again, it's kind of like the old big umbrella idea, just group together with people and kind of brand yourselves a bit to get, you just help out with more promotion and such. So yeah, that is the history of, 10 years, 2000, that's 12 years ago now. I always say I want to do another issue, like a new, actual printed border, maybe put a short story in there or something. So we'll see. Like I said, I've been saying that for years and it hasn't happened. But promotion wise, it was a good thing to do for all those years. And of course nowadays we have digital newsletters and of course social networks, right? We're all on social network. We're doing our own YouTube channels. We're podcasting. But it's all about always promoting, letting people know what you're doing, what you have. So I don't do the printed newsletters anymore, but I do print up postcards, right? I mean, I think most people do postcards. They're cheap. Well, literally, like probably a penny a card by the time you do 250, 500, 1,000 cards. This is just a sample. I try to do one every couple of years. So this is the current one. I think I've done it for about 2 years now. If I run out, I just print up another box. But this is the 20th anniversary one. Again, it's just a matter of giving something physical to somebody. And, people like to put these on the refrigerator or whatever, pin it on their wall in their cubicle. But, it's got just a quick, brief description of me and my comic, my work. And, of course, the social networks. You got to keep all that up there, email and wherever they can find you, websites. So these are always fun to do because these are always free to give out. People like these. They take them from the table. They ask for them. And like the idea that, over the last 22 years, besides the newsletter, if people don't buy stuff from me, maybe they have something hanging on their wall or in a drawer at home. I'm sure a ton of them got tossed out over the years, right? But, it's just a way of leaving something in somebody's possession where they remember what you're about. Not so they just like think about me, like, oh, how's that? But like, oh, I forgot about this work. Let me check it out, So promote, right? This is a great quote by Roddy Piper, right? The late wrestling legend, Hot Rod Roddy Piper. One time he was talking about himself, and he says that people say, you shouldn't toot your own horn, and I say, why not? Who better knows the tune? So, can't think of any better advice than coming from Hot Rod Roddy Piper. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much. As usual, I'm going to ask you to, if you want to like the video there when you're watching it, that'd be appreciated. If you want to leave a comment, please do. I'm always looking for discussions we can start, or if you have any questions, I can, maybe share some insights for you. And of course, always helps me out if you subscribe to the channel. Just click on the button there on the YouTube page, and you'll be notified the next time I dig through home here and find a whole bunch of other interesting things to share. So thank you very much, and we will talk again. Goodbye.